Okay, so sorry for the delay. At any rate, we, as promised, be discussing this funny topic. It appears in the Talmud. Now we have some soul searching and some head scratching to do.
The shiur is Leilu Nishmat Aliyah Bat Freha.
Your grandmother, this is, yeah?
Rivka's grandmother.
Rivka's grandmother. Aliyah Bat Freha, remember the name. So the Gemara, believe it or not, people, especially in this generation, this day and age, everyone likes to be academic and rationalist, etc. The Gemara makes many a reference to Shedim, to the Satan, to they translate these demons. I don't even know how that started, but that's one of those typically Christian concepts, like blonde angels with wings. Yeah. So the Gemara makes the following comment. The Gemara says that we do Tikrat HaShofar. It sounds, according to the majority opinion, that we do the shofar, that we make the brachot standing up. We sit down for the Tkiyot, and then we do the next two sets during the silent recitation of the Musaf, and during the Chazan's repetition of the Musaf standing up. And why do we do it this way? Says the Gemara, Le'arbev et ha-Satan, like to confuse the Satan. So, this doesn't confuse my 3-year-old son. I don't know, is the Satan that stupid that we can blow the shofar sitting down and standing up, and this throws him off, so to speak? Or for that matter, the more existential question, what exactly is the Satan? How do we define or describe such a concept? Why does this make its way into our Rosh Hashanah liturgy, into our Siddur, our Tefillah? It's a little bit bizarre. We don't have any other holidays during which we even incorporate the Satan as part of the discussion, let alone as anything having to do with the religious service. So I'm not implying chas v'shalom that we pray to the Satan or that we offer him anything, but the general idea that the Gemara says that we do something, in other words, some of our practice, some of our observance on this day has to do with confusing the Satan, which is a very bizarre concept to begin with. So first of all, what is this concept of Satan? Second of all, what exactly does it mean that the Satan can be confused? Why is it that this is what we're trying to achieve, as opposed to killing or deporting him or imprisoning him or revoking his visa? What is our goal? Is this the purpose of life, is to confuse the Satan? And on this particular day, it's how we happen to do it. And other days, we'll do it otherwise. And what does this mean for us in the bigger scheme of things, the bigger picture? So, we do have a couple of references to Satan. Once in the 5 books in the Chumash, in the Torah itself.
Then you have Sefer Yov.
Sefer Yov makes very frequent reference to it. Correct.
Just there.
We about 2 years ago, a year ago, I think we did some study from Sefer Yov. You have, correct. There's reference, Zechariah also talks about it. There's a few other prophets that mentioned. So we have the concept of Le Satan Lo. It appears, if anybody wants to guess, before Shlomo takes the opportunity from all of us.
Le Satan Lo?
Le Satan Lo.
It's not in the Chumash.
We have by Bilam that sorry, we have Kiras Derech Negdi, we have the Malach who's standing in front of him. So we have Zechariah. I'm a little bit upset about it, but my mind is not with me. We have this concept by Zechariah. Actually, if you don't have a Chumash, I'd be happy to open up and double check Bilam. Should be there. At any rate, we have by Zechariah. We don't have any mention explicitly of devil or diabolic in the Torah. We have the Nachash, which is actually representation, according to most commentaries, representation of Yetzer Hara in the bigger picture. And we have an interesting reference in Zechariah, for example. Zechariah refers to Yehoshua, not Yehoshua the prophet, Yehoshua the Kohen Gadol. And what does Yehoshua the Kohen Gadol do? Well, he appears in Zechariah's prophecy. Zechariah, who lived right before the destruction, he appears in this prophecy as the former Kohen Gadol, and he's dressed in clothes that are V'hu lavush begadim tzo'im. Tzo'ah in Hebrew means excrement. There's no really nice way to say that. So he is effectively, he sees the former Kohen Gadol in a very disgraceful state. And so what happens is, in this prophetic vision, he sees the Kohen, instead of being dressed in the 8 unique clothes that are the uniform, so to speak, of the Kohen Gadol, we're told that Yehoshua appears in begadim tzoim, in clothes that are covered in excrement. So Zechariah sees this and he's upset, and he is beside himself. So we're told that he sees Yehoshua, v'hasatan omed al yamino lesitno, and the Satan is standing to his right in order to lesitno. What does it mean, lesitno? We could describe this in more than one way, or try to make a sense of it in more than one context. It could be a form of prosecution. The Gemara says, in fact, that Yehoshua was being prosecuted over the fact that his sons had married women that were inappropriate to them. According to one opinion, it sounds this way from the Talmud. They married women that were inappropriate for the Kehuna. According to Zohar, it sounds like they married women that were inappropriate altogether. And effectively, so what happens next is that Vayomer Hashem el Satan, Hashem says to the Satan, whatever this is that Yehoshua is seeing, is experiencing, Yigar Hashem becha Satan, Yigar Hashem becha habochar b'Yerushalayim, halo ze ud mutzal me'esh. Very strange pasuk. So Hashem says to the Satan, perhaps with some influence from Zechariah, we don't know, there's an interaction there. Yigar Hashem becha Satan, Hashem should shout at you or bark at you, the Satan. Yigar Hashem becha habochar b'Yerushalayim, and the Eternal One should again shout at you, the one who chose Jerusalem, the one who made his sanctuary in Jerusalem. This is a stick, just like you would put sticks in a fire. This is a stick that was saved from fire. And so he appears redressed in more normal clothing. This is prophetic vision. It effectively, according to the Rambam, it's a form of divinely inspired dream. And the vision, then he goes on, he sees a menorah. That's why we read this particular haftarah by Shabbat Chanukah. Anyway, the concept of Satan is easily etymologically related to Sotah. If you look through the Torah, interestingly enough, in the Mishnah and the Gemara, it seems like up until the time of the Rambam, and including, the custom was to write, as it appears in the Torah, Sotah with a sin tet, as opposed to a samech tet. So if you look today on the bookshelf, you'll find the Masechet Sotah Samech Vav Tet Hey, which is not how it's spelled in the Torah. Kisatit Tum'ah Tachat Ishech, so Sin Tet Yud Tav is how it appears. Where Sotah literally means listot, it means to deviate. Right? To deviate means you have a straight path between point A and point B, and the path that you took isn't exactly straight, it's crooked. So what is it that let's say the main purpose or the main goal of this concept of Satan is to cause us to deviate, right? If we can refer to the Satan as the general concept of Yetzer Hara, the Satan causes us to go off the beaten path, to lose track, to lose sight, to lose the goal, the target, and effectively, you'll forgive me for using the expression, the Satan confuses us, right? We've spoken about this before. There is no such thing as an avirah. There's no prosecutable crime that happens against your will. There's nothing the Torah can punish you for if you were an innocent bystander, so to speak. We don't define chet, we don't define avirah, we don't define sin, malfeasance, wrongdoing as something that happened to you. It's something that happened by you. It's a decision that you made, it's a choice that you made, but something that you got up and proactively did. I can warn you, don't light that cigarette, it's Shabbat, don't turn on that car, don't eat whatever it is that you're about to eat. You're about to make a terrible mistake, but you'd be the one initiating something, doing something. You can initiate and choose to do good things, or you can choose to do bad things. So what's the role of the Satan? The role of the Satan is to confuse your concepts, to confuse your goals, to confuse your ideals. Basically, this is how bad things happen. Okay? If you look around you, people that you know, your own life, etc., the overwhelming majority of things that are done wrong in Olam Hazeh are probably not pirate, terrorists, ISIS, beheadings. That's not the way most of the world works. Even animals don't behave this way. It's a unique level of spirituality that these Muslims have achieved, unsurpassed by other human civilizations. Call them civilizations, not nice. But not nice to their civilizations. Most of the evil or wrong done in Olam Hazeh is probably done with some kind of confused concept of good. People sometimes mistake good for bad, or good for better, or better for worse. People do things with good intentions. Well-meaning, nice types can also make terrible mistakes, embarrass, humiliate people. So the Satan is really good at what, if we can say, he does. Yetzer Hara has a very powerful stranglehold over humanity. So here comes Rosh Hashanah, 2 days of judgment, during which the shofar is sounded, and we are supposed to wake up in order to do teshuvah. And this confuses the force of confusion. You follow that? What confuses us into doing the wrong thing, what confuses us into mistaking right for wrong, it's our job in Rosh Hashanah to confuse it. Right? So it's like, well, you could say we're fighting fire with fire, right? So normally, my Yetzer Hara, it tricks me, it seduces me, it entices me, it confuses me, it gets me to choose to do the wrong thing. How do I combat this? I combat this by confusing. So that sounds a little bit almost infantile. Like if one of my kids were fighting with another one and wanted to confuse him or her, throw a sheet over their head, or fake a voice or something. This doesn't cut it when you're talking about a non-physical entity. So, according to the majority opinion, the reason that we blow the shofar, we make the bracha standing up, and we sit down, it's got an interesting, like this is what confuses the Satan. We make the bracha standing up, and then we sit down, and then we stand up. So here's an interesting thought. This is out of Derech Hashem of the Ramchal. We had done a little bit from the introduction previously. Ramchal, he writes like this. The Gemara says we were redeemed in Nisan, B'Nisan Nigalu, B'Nisan Atidin Higael, right? So we were redeemed in Nisan, and we will be redeemed once again in Nisan. So he says, no. Does that mean that the Geula, the redemption, is impossible from Rosh Chodesh Iyar until the end of the month of Adar? Like there's no point praying for it, or if I pray for it, I'm praying that it should happen in Nisan, and if I missed it, then it's going to be at least another 11 months until we're redeemed? Sure, right, that's what the Gemara says, no? You were redeemed in Nisan, you'll be re-redeemed in Nisan. So he explains no. He says the way we were redeemed from Egypt, the same general principles, the same concepts, the same ideas. There's great confusion, great assimilation, there's a test of our emunah, a test of our identity. We need to muster up the courage to stand for our principles, stand for our national identity, stand for our Torah, our mitzvot. And at some point, there's a window of opportunity, and that window eventually closes, right? Just as happened in Egypt during the plague of darkness, Makat Choshech. Chazal tell us, perhaps 80%, maybe more, of the Jews alive at the time died in Egypt, right? Imagine this: the 20% that left was the 20% that merited leaving Egypt, that deserved to go, and even they complained and wanted to go back. I can only imagine what the 80% thought. So this 80% didn't make the cut. 20% were redeemed, 80% weren't, because the time came, it had to happen. So let me ask you an interesting question, picking on Shlomo tonight. Shlomo, couldn't Hashem have waited a little bit longer, a day, a week, a month, maybe even a year, and nonetheless saved 80% of the Jewish nation? I mean, wouldn't that be a great idea? If I were planning a party of redemption, I would say, listen, we can have a cute party, 20 people, 20% of the people would come, it's one thing. We want to have a block party. We want everyone to come and participate. Like, this is the redemption at the end of the day. These are the children of Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Why would we not wait? Or why would that window of opportunity not be big enough to include, to incorporate 80% of the nation?
Because you know there's no hope.
No hope. Meaning no hope for what?
So you can ask a question.
Hashem couldn't do this if he wanted
You
to.
can
He
ask
was
that
trying to
question
tell
in
me.
anything. Why would a guy die in the middle of the year? Get him into Rosh Hashanah. Maybe he's going to do tshuva and then he's going to live another year.
Fair enough. So eventually what? This concept of time, cruel as it is, I mean, ultimately has to be reconciled, has to be reckoned with. We don't live forever. In fact, if we did live forever, we'd probably never do teshuvah. Fact is, Hashem took away eternal life from Olam Hazeh. So it gives us a sense of urgency, right? This is the nature of time. Time is a sense of urgency. You can't do everything. You had better prioritize your time. Don't waste it. Use it productively. Why? Because you only have so much of it to go around. And then regardless of whether you did good or bad, a lot of good, a lot of bad, your time is going to run out. And it's one of these resources that's not renewable.
Yeah, I was gonna say that like that's the most valuable thing that we have because you can't like money. You can always like make up the losses that you like in business. Like there's always a chance to make up a loss. Like but like with time, you can never get back a month of your life or 2 months of your life.
Correct. Rav Redby used to say that time is the most valuable resource that we have. There is no way to recover or recuperate it. You can basically make use of it or regret the lack of use that you made of it. So how does this work as far as redemption? Maybe teshuvah probably works along the same lines. So it says the Ramachal like this. We were saved, we were redeemed in Nisan based on the divine formula for redemption. And that formula doesn't change. It's not, nothing you do is going to help. You can kick and scream. You're not going to change this. The reality is that redemption very often, in fact, almost most of the time, comes from the darkest hour, from the point at which people had basically lost hope. There's a bit of an awakening. Some people catch on to it, some people don't. There comes a time of, let's say, fleshing out this identification with this feeling. You kind of feel it, and that strength, that feeling gets stronger and stronger. Your devotion, your conviction, your emunah gets stronger and stronger. Then all of a sudden, boom, the axe comes down. Whoever's in is in, whoever's out is out, and the whole thing is over. 80% of the Jews died. Basically, the entire Egyptian nation, everybody who chased after the Jews died too, and that was it. The beginning of a new chapter. Not that it was perfect, not that it was, glitch-free, but it was the beginning of the next chapter of the Jewish nation's history. So he explains like this: one of these features that's inextricably related to the redemption from Egypt, one of these things that you cannot ignore and that will in fact be a de facto component of any redemption anywhere in the world, individual, national, etc., is this concept of time, this concept of speed, the concept of resolve. And so he explains. Each and every one of us has a happy, healthy, and well-funded Yetzer Hara, right? No one can claim that we have that we are exempt from temptations of a whole variety of different kinds. This generation's greatest temptation, seriously the greatest, more than food, more than inappropriate relations, probably depression. Mm-hmm. There's something very attractive and very appealing about depression. It's like the excuse for everything. Mm-hmm. I am so depressed, I can't do anything, I don't feel like doing it, I'm too sick to function. Don't even criticize me, because how could you criticize someone who's weak and
but it comes
unmotivated?
But there's biological. You can't say that.
I don't believe for a second there isn't a milligram of me that believes there's such a thing as biological depression.
There is.
I'm glad to hear it. I've heard people say it 1,000 times. I don't
that
believe in it.
People like can't walk out. Like
it's possible to bring yourself to such a situation.
Clinical depression is an illness.
Okay. Clinical depression is a spiritual illness.
Mm-hmm.
You can be so depressed that you're willing to take your own life. People do it on a daily basis. It's possible that you reach such a point that you can no longer see light. It's possible that you reach such a point that you are completely exasperated, that you don't believe there's any good left, or any good left in you, or anyone who cares about you, etc. And that can have serious health effects, read suicidal tendencies. I don't doubt that for a second. I don't believe for a single millisecond that there's such a thing as someone who was born predisposed to die of depression or to be addicted to drugs, etc. We have no clue how the brain works. Very little. We're understanding very little bits and pieces of this. There is no such thing. Anybody can learn to work on themselves, can learn to be happy with what you have. Some people are better at being happy than others, but you know what? That's probably one of the biggest challenges we have in this generation, is working on simcha, We don't have it. We don't have it in our mitzvot. We barely have it. We think we have it sometimes. We give into certain temptations. I don't buy for a second that there is such a concept. As someone who's just biologically depressed, that's the way I am, and don't try to change it.
No, it's not that you can't change. It's just that there is there are biological, they've studied this.
People have different tendencies, and people are tempted by different things. So I do believe there are some people who have some form of predisposition, let's say, for lusting after material wealth. There are probably some people who are much more challenged by sexual misbehavior. There probably are people who are more likely to become dependent on chemicals or drugs or alcohol than others. There are probably people whose temptation is more along the lines of megalomania, control, ego. There are people, everybody's got different temptations, and they're expressed differently in different people. Some people are more strongly challenged in one area than another. So I do believe there are people, perhaps, for whom simcha, or the escape from depression, is their life's major purpose, or their greatest challenge, or something they need to work on. What I don't believe is that it's a purely biological problem, that the solution to it is chemical.
Oh, definitely. But
this is I mean,
that
might help certain
that,
medications,
serotonin
etc.
and that you have to see the hormones, and there's different.
The hormones are an expression of your state of mind. That's what they are. If you're really nervous or you're really anxious, your brain and other organs of the body, other nodes or glands will secrete certain hormones. You get frightened, your body's going to secrete adrenaline. It comes from your kidneys, right? It's not to say that you have an adrenaline problem. Technically, in this particular local instance, you might have a surplus of adrenaline, and you can blame that for a whole bunch of things, but the spiritual x-ray of such a situation is you got scared by something. Maybe when you were scared, you made a less than perfect judgment, and maybe you can work on how you react when you're scared. Medically, biologically, if you want to call that, I had lots of adrenaline and it was hard for me to make a decision or to keep my wits about me, that might be true, but it's true because it started with your spiritual state of mind or where your nefesh was at a particular time. More than happy to discuss at length, but I feel very strongly and very emphatically about that. Look, it wouldn't be the first time the medical community had an interest in promoting a certain concept.
I don't think that I don't think that it's an excuse for someone to misbehave. I just think that it's a biological based thing.
I think there are a lot of people that want us to believe that. Some of them are psychologists, some of them are psychiatrists, some of them are social workers, some of them are pharmaceutical companies. There's an awful lot of money in depression. There are billions and billions of dollars in depression. Anyway, and that's not to count the illicit money that goes into things like drugs or gambling, people's way out of depression, what they do when they're depressed, but topic for another time. So explains the Ramchal like this. What happens when you are entirely consumed by a Yetzer, when you are entirely under the control of a vice? Basically, there's something that you're tempted by, or something that you're grappling with, or something that you're struggling with. So he explains in the context of the redemption. He explains that just like the Geula came in our darkest hour, when everybody had pretty much given up on redemption, or there were very few who were still hanging on and keeping the faith, we were basically, what do Chazal say? We read this, the Midrash says about Egypt. If we hadn't left Egypt then, we would have been slaves even up until now. Concept of the Midrash of 49 levels of impurity, and how we reached level 50, we never would have made it out. Would have been impossible to be redeemed. So we were on the cusp, we were on the verge. It wasn't like Egypt happened by accident or the Geula happened by accident. We were so close to being entirely and totally and completely lost for all eternity that then the redemption happened. And he explains, how did it happen? We have this interesting concept, obligation, if you will, by Pesach, that the entire Geula happened really, really quickly. Right? We had about a year building up with the plagues. Everybody started to figure out where they were standing. By the way, it may be that by the third plague that was already done. But we left Egypt in Bechipazon. And the Torah tells us we left hastily, we left quickly. And the Torah tells us this, and it emphasizes it a few times. And we eat matzah, and it's supposed to remind us that we left Egypt quickly. So why did we leave Egypt so quickly? What was the purpose? What was the point of leaving Egypt so fast? What was the goal couldn't Hashem have made it such that we have time to let the bread rise and we could eat mufleta or baguette or pita on Pesach? God created the world and everything in it. So he explains the whole purpose of leaving Egypt is the matzah itself, which is supposed to teach us a lesson, which is any struggle that you have with Yetzer Hara, the only way to beat it is by a quick and swift change. That's it. That's the rule. That's the secret. You want to beat Yetzer Hara, you need to make a sudden, quick, powerful change. Needs to happen fast, and you need to never look back. Interesting little Torah referent here. You're familiar with the story of Lot and his wife?
Mm-hmm.
How she's leaving, they're on their way out of Sodom, and she looks back like, you're really more concerned with what happens to these people than you are with what's going to be with your own life or where you're going to go forward. So at that very moment, she basically relinquished her own life. So he says, we left Egypt, but leaving quickly wasn't an accident. It wasn't a circumstance. It wasn't a mistake or a technical historical detail. This is how Egypt needs to be left. This is how you can escape the grasp of the Satan, so to speak. You need to come out like a bullet. You need to make a decisive change, and you need to act on it quickly. Think, by the way, good example of this, people who are addicted to cigarettes. I don't know how many of you know.
Or any addiction.
Struggles. Really, any addiction. Some of them are harder than others. But the most successful method of quitting cigarettes, the one that has probably the least likelihood of relapse, is cold turkey, where you just stop altogether. Because as long as you're still playing with it, I know a guy who's been struggling with this for 10 years. A young guy, too. He's a few years younger than me. He'd smoke, and then he'd cut it back to 3 or 4 cigarettes a day, but then when he was under pressure, he'd go back to smoking again, and it would be difficult for him to tone it down. At the same time, funny example, but my father-in-law smoked for many years. He was smoking from before they knew it was damaging to your health. One day decided, that's it. I've had enough. This has an adverse effect on my health. So he took the last pack of cigarettes, he wrote the date on it, and he left it in his kitchen. And he still has it there. That's it. I decided one day I'm not smoking anymore. And he stopped. The first 2-3 days were difficult. After a week or two, it wasn't that big a deal. Now he hates the smell of smoke. He doesn't understand why anybody want to do this. It's a waste of time. It's a waste of money. It's a waste of precious life. So the Ramchal explains this is not an accident. This is very much intentional. By the way, we do mention even by Rosh Hashanah, it does have some reminiscent aspect of the leaving Egypt, the redemption from Egypt. So swift, sudden change, something resolute. You need to come up with a plan or an idea. I'm going to work on this. I'm not going to do it slowly or gradually. I'm not necessarily. Some changes in life happen that way for a variety of reasons, but the real lasting changes that actually change who you are and where you stand, they happen fast. They happen quick. They happen when you decide to cut. You're completely and totally committed to it, and you move on, right? I don't think the decision to get married is a bad example of this. I think it's something that everybody I know struggles with and grapples with. It takes them forever. They date for 5 years, and they shred each other to pieces over now or later. Should we not? Just do it. Sometimes you take the plunge. If you like each other, you have something in common. My suggestion is you enjoy each other's company even more when you're married. It drags out and it goes on, and you overanalyze and you look at everything under a microscope. Yeah, chances are you're going to squash it. Because you know what? You look at anybody under a microscope, and we're pretty terrible. Even physically, covered with bacteria, we don't even look so clean. Okay, so no. Rosh Hashanah, we're all being judged. We all have our faults. Sometimes the decision needs to be made, that's it, I'm going to do it. And in fact, if you talk to most couples who decided to get married, usually there was like this moment, this thing, and boom, did it. Pop the question, everything else kind of works out. Couples like this with kids sometimes too. Should we not? Then all of a sudden, boom, just this light goes on and it works out. So psychologically, it works out. So the concept of confusing the Satan, so to speak, is basically our antidote to, I'm tempted to say, the Satan. The reality is this is our antidote to ourselves. Because to think of the Yetzer Hara as something external to you, to think of the Yetzer Hara as something foreign, right? There's someone who bothers me and makes me eat non-kosher food. There's someone sitting on my shoulder who tells me to say inappropriate things to inappropriate people. There's someone who crawls into my head and makes me think about things I should be thinking about. That's nonsense. Yetzer Hara is effectively part of you. This is one of your tendencies. You need to own this. You need to decide, this is true. I have a problem, but my problem is mine to fix. My destiny is mine to create. I need to work on this. Whatever it is. Whatever it is, everyone has their own Yetzer Hara. There's no one here who doesn't have one. So, I need to confuse what confuses me. And how do we do this? We do this by doing something bizarre, by changing our position. So we make the brachot standing up, right? Because standing up is a good thing. And then we sit down. Why do we sit down? Sitting down is different from standing up. And just so you don't say that the standing or the sitting was the most important, we're going to stand up again. Why? It's time for change. It's time for sudden, drastic, almost bizarre changes. You can confuse the Satan when you change your habits, when you change your expectations, when you change your course. It's a very funny way to put it. But if we were to make the brachot standing up and blow the shofar standing up, maybe it would have a different effect. Maybe that sitting down is that second you can think about. Up until now we were standing, now we're sitting. Usually when we do mitzvot we stand up. In fact, can you think of any other mitzvah that you do sitting down? Anywhere?
Kiddush, you said, it depends on who you say.
The Rabbanan.
No, Kiddush is midoraita.
No, the first one, not the one that when you
Depends
sit
on-
down. The one when you stand up is
You're
the right.
talking about the
They shape
shofar.
sukkah.
The ShaBaSh, aha! But I'll get you on this one too. Have I fulfilled the mitzvah if I stood up when I was eating bread?
You're good.
You did, yeah, you're good.
did.
And so, how do we read the ShaBaSh? It's funny because
Standing up and then you sit down.
Leshev doesn't mean to sit down. This is like a
means to
mistake.
It's
I'm
supposed to be
about-
like sleeping in.
I'm about to
No,
sit.
Leshev Vayeshev Yaakov Be'eretz Goshen. To dwell,
To
to
dwell,
live. This is
yeah.
why the Mishnah says we eat in the sukkah, we sleep in the sukkah, we walk around the sukkah, which is a very funny expression by the way, but we make use of the sukkah the way you would make use of any residence, because this is your residence for these 7 or 8 days here in Chutz La'aretz. The mitzvah is to live in the sukkah. In fact, most of the mitzvot that we do standing up, right? Discussion Kurat Shema, the Gemara says that if you intentionally lie down, it's actually wrong, you shouldn't. Stand up and do it. The Amidah, when we pray, it's called Amidah, no?
Mm-hmm.
And this is a mitzvah midoraita, according to the Rambam, at least once a day. You're standing up, you're praying to Hashem, it's instead of the korbanot, the sacrifices, the kohanim. Where do they sit in Beit HaMikdash? Does anyone sit in Beit HaMikdash?
No.
No. We make kiddush standing up. We sit down when we drink. That's because that's the way we normally drink, and it is ultimately supposed to be a pleasurable thing. It's a berkat anyway, so we sit down when we eat, etc. But the kiddush is a mitzvah midoraita, we say it standing up. We do just about everything else. Tefillin, by the way, very interestingly.
Yeah,
We sit down, right, for the yad.
The Sephardim
yeah.
sit down only for the tefillin shel yad. The Zohar makes the whole point of this being a difference, a demarcation between tefillin shel rosh, the tefillin shel rosh on a higher level. So we demonstrate this
Stand
by
up.
sitting for the tefillin shel yad, standing for tefillin shel rosh. But clearly, the standing up for tefillin shel rosh is a universal thing, and everybody admits that it's on a higher level. The kedusha of tefillin shel rosh is on a higher level than the kedusha of tefillin shel yad. So, when we're reading from the Torah, we're reading standing up. In fact, the one blowing the shofar, by the way, is supposed to be standing.
Yeah,
If nothing
not
else,
sitting.
out of kavod hatzibur. He's the only one who's not sitting, he's the one actually blowing the shofar. The mitzvah we read is not to blow the shofar so much as to hear it. So you'll fulfill your obligation when you're sitting down, but the one blowing the shofar is going to be standing up. Why? Kavod hatzibur. It's the respectful thing to do when you're representing the community. You hold yourself to a higher standing, a geographically higher standard. You stand up. Most of the mitzvot that we perform standing up. Here, the shofar, we do something counterintuitive, something almost illogical. Why would I, and even so, why do I make the bracha sitting down and stay seated?
We do also for Megillah also sit down.
We make the bracha standing up.
Right, but everybody is listening.
Probably, because it's too hard to read standing up. Incidentally, are you familiar with the Shulchan Aruch on Kurat Torah?
If someone said no,
According to Shulchan Aruch, we're supposed to be standing up during Kurat Torah.
everyone,
Everyone.
it's too tiring.
Everyone. But it's too difficult for us. So, Ikar Adin, we should be standing up. We sit down during Kriyat Torah. Why? Because it's too long. It's too difficult for us to stand the entire time. And therefore, we have this whole discussion. You're familiar with this by Aseret HaDibrot? The 10 Commandments. We stand or we
Yeah,
sit.
do we stand or do we sit?
The Rambam was
Stand up.
adamant about this.
Stand up.
We should stand up. Well, he said we should stand up for the entire reading. But if already the custom has become that we sit down, don't stand up just for Aseret HaDibrot. Why? Because it's as if you're implying Aseret HaDibrot are holier than the rest of the Torah.
But Moroccans and
The
Ashkenazis still
psukim-
stand up.
There still nonetheless was such a custom. The explanation for that would be, really we should be standing for everything. At least for this we should stand. But then if you're going to say at least for this, so why don't you stand up for Matan Torah. Why don't we stand up in Parshat Yitro, and the Torah actually given, not just the Yisrael Libot, the whole thing. So the Rambam says, look, really, we should stand for the entire Torah, but there's no difference. The Rambam makes this point too. There's no difference between the psukim that describe Lot and his daughters and the psukim that describe where we went in Sinai, or the psukim that describe Shabbat or anything else. The entire Torah is holy. The entire Torah is holy. Really, we should be standing when we're reading the Torah, when we're hearing it. We only sit because we're weak. By the way, interesting discussion when it comes to the Amidah and Chazarat Hashatz, the repetition of the Chazan. Because there too, the Sephardim stand up. The Ashkenazim admit that it's nice if you can stand, and if you can't, you would sit. But really, it's still prayer. You're being represented by the Chazan. So here, what we're doing is something bizarre and counterintuitive, even with a mitzvah. In other words, I can even do this mitzvah in a different way. It's not that I didn't fulfill my obligation if I was standing or if I was sitting. It's that this custom, this is what we do with the Gemara says. So the reality is, sometimes you do something a little outside the box, a little bit counterintuitive, in a kind of tricky way. And it works, and it helps. There are all kinds of patenting. There are all kinds of tricks like this that you can use in life. I'll tell you something really funny. Sometimes, especially when it comes to studying or learning or doing things that we don't always find so easy, but you know that you should do it, there are plenty of therapists who would recommend such a thing as giving yourself a prize. How silly does that sound, give myself a prize? If I sit and I learn for 15 minutes, I'm going to give myself a chocolate bar. That's not even kindergarten. That's like pre-K.
Because it's making associations. It's Piaget. It's like that. Like it's associating good things with.
But you made the rules.
But it doesn't matter. It's just you're conditioning yourself.
So you're effectively manipulating yourself.
Yeah.
You're tricking yourself like a carrot and a stick. You're tricking yourself into doing something. Really, you know you should be. If you should be learning, then learn. You're tricking yourself into learning. You're saying, well, I should be doing this or reading Tehillim or studying or visiting, whatever it is. And I'll give myself a prize that, I'm going to take my favorite dessert and I'll only eat it after I did what I'm supposed to do. It's like you're negotiating with a teenager to do homework before they go out of the house. It's funny. It's funny, but sometimes these tricks help. Sometimes you need to trick yourself. You need to basically trick the Satan in you. In other words, trick your Yetzer Hara. Sometimes in silly little infantile ways. Sometimes in really big, bombastic ways. But what's so confusing about the standing and the sitting? It's a funny little switcheroo that we pull. And it's symbolic of this concept of sometimes like a last-minute switch, something goes off, a light, a bomb, whatever it is. There's a sudden change in my life. Incidentally, I was talking to somebody about this, was it today or yesterday? Yesterday. Had a discussion about how many people make decisive changes in their lives when someone passes away. So it's a sudden event, it's a sudden occurrence in your life. All of a sudden you say, you know what? Really, my whole life, I should have been waking up earlier and praying with a minyan, or I should have been keeping Shabbat or eating kosher, or whatever. Now that someone passed away, it's like that pushes me over the edge. It's like, that's it. I've determined now I'm going to make this change. I've decided this is it. I'm changing. I'm not looking back. I know a lot of people who made very, effective and meaningful changes in their lives, and that was like the switch. That was the trigger, so to speak. So this concept is not a silly concept. Doing something sometimes in a different way, changing something, doing something unexpected, out of the ordinary, according to the Ramchal, is the way to beat Yetzer Hara. Why? Because he explains it in one word, Hergel. Because of habits, because of routine. Things are routine, you get used to doing things, and eventually you get used to doing them a certain way, and routine will kill you, physically and spiritually. You can get used to smoking cigarettes, as nasty as they are. You can sit there buying them for $10 a pack. I don't know how much they cost now in New York City. You can burn your money, you can burn your lungs, you can cause yourself cancer.
They buy them loose now on tax.
Individual, yeah. That's how I sold them in Morocco last time I was there, 18 years ago. So more, 20. So basically he says, because habits and routine have such a tight grip on our neshama, you need to escape from them the way we escaped from Egypt, which is quickly. Make a sudden, abrupt, but forceful, strong change in your life, and you'll be able to change your habits. It's very, very hard to escape the Satan with slow, gradual things. Why? He explains, a very deep Kabbalistic concept, because Yetzer Hara will adapt. Yetzer Hara is profoundly adaptable. So if you start making slow and gradual changes, what's going to happen is Yetzer Hara is going to slowly and gradually change along with you. And it's going to be very difficult for you to shake that. You make a violent, sudden change, maybe you'll get a few days of, it's new, it's different, I'm still figuring this out. All of a sudden, boom, before you know it, it's a habit. Now I have a new habit. My habits have changed, my routine has changed. So this idea of constantly challenging your routine, challenging your habits, challenging the way that you're used to doing things, he says is the secret to redemption, both at the individual level and at the national level.
Well, if you do something for 6 weeks, apparently, you can change. Like if you consistently, if you're able to be consistent for 6 weeks for something. So like I was trying to change the way I walked or like the way I sat, and just being very cognizant about it, because like just for like if you do it, I was told that if you do it for 6 weeks,
the Balei Musar talk about 40 days.
yeah.
I was gonna say the
Yeah.
selichot. You get used to wake up in the morning for 40
So it's
days,
Ah,
then you're a rock star.
but it's a good habit.
Yeah.
it's and actually we do it. It's irregular in the sense that we only do it 1 month per, a little bit more than a month per year. But the idea of 40 days, there's a whole this Zohar
Like
talks about the length.
36 days. No, 36
42?
days. 42. Yeah,
The Zohar
42.
talks about this 40-day concept. It was 40 days was the Mabul, was the flood. So humanity made a violent, drastic change from totally corrupt, hopelessly lost in their desires and temptations to a humanity that has hope. And it took 40 days. There's the 40 days it took to receive the Torah, the 40 days it took to get to pray for our forgiveness, the 40 days to get the second set of Luchot. This idea of 40 is very much associated with total transition. Not little changes, total transition. Another beautiful remez to this, not lost in the Zohar. How much water goes into a kosher mikveh?
40 something.
So 40, what's the 40 represent?
40 days of...
The same concept. You want some more connections to this? How many days Chazal said before a fetus is considered, an embryo is considered a fetus?
Oh, 40 days.
Also 40 days, right? 40 days before a child is conceived, what does the Gemara say?
That we know who is Zivug is.
30 days.
Your 40 yom. 40 days before the conception of a child, or really the development of a fetus. Incidentally, there are those commentaries who understood that to mean that it's at the conception itself, because until 40 days we don't consider it a viable fetus. So up until 40 days, for example, it's not technically considered abortion. Afterwards, it would be that you consider that you aborted something meaningful, something serious. But the idea, as a concept, this 40 days is a very meaningful thing. And the icing on the cake would be this concept of 39. What does 39 mean?
Almost a full change?
Almost a full change. Everything but. Like everything, x minus 1, that's all. So we have that, for example, by Shabbat. What does Shabbat represent for us?
49 melachot.
40 melachot minus 1. There are 40 different things that, it's 40 chasar echad. 39 melachot on Shabbat. Why? Because Shabbat is me'ein olam haba. It's not olam haba, it's me'ein olam haba. It's as if it's reminiscent of olam haba, as close as you can get in olam hazeh. We talked about this concept of 1 in 60 versus 1 out of 61.
Yeah.
It's like as null as you can be without being null. So, how about malkot, the lashes that we give?
40.
Really, the Torah says 40. 40 yakenu lo yosif,
But you
penusif
do
lakutot aleh.
39.
The Chachamim diminished it to 39. It sounds like a simple reading of the Torah. 40 yakenu. Hit him 40 times. So, 40 yakenu lo yosif, penusif lakutot aleh lema karaba, v'nikra achicha le'enecha. So, why do we hit 39 times and not 40? Aside from the fact that it makes a really cool 3 times 13, like but there's got to be a better reason than that.
40 is considered like a death sentence.
40 would be you're on the razor's edge
Yeah.
between completely destroying the person. What the 40 represents, what the concept represents, because it could be that after 3 or 4, if the Gemara says, very interesting, if he needs a change of diaper, then we assume, to use the early childhood analogy, then we assume his punishment to have been completed. That's a pretty embarrassing thing to have happened to you. So the idea is not to push him over the edge. And as far as you can go, if he could take 39 lashes, that's impressive. Take 39 lashes, but we don't go 40. Why? Because the idea is to make him from a tzaddik, from a rasha to a tzaddik, not to completely destroy him, just to straighten him out. I could say him or her. I don't know if they're lashed women. I doubt women do things that deserve lashing, but yeah.
Well, it's for like, I think that also the idea of like saying Kaddish for someone that you don't do it for all 12, like it's 11 months, isn't that?
Yes.
Because you don't want to say that
We
they're
subtract, the custom
Yeah.
today is that we subtract a week.
like, yeah.
We take off a week after the 11 months, and then we do the last 3 weeks of that same month. But that's the idea. It's like a little bit less than everything, but not much less.
Because you don't want to say that they're like,
We don't imply the person was a Rasha Gamoras, was like a totally wicked individual. At the same time, we don't want to imply that they don't need the extra merits. In our generation, everybody would have. So effectively, that's a mouthful right there. But the idea that the solution to confusion is confusing it. In other words, changing from the norm, from what's expected, changing your habits and your routine, the most unchangeable aspects of you, is really how redemption begins. That's exactly what Rosh Hashanah is all about. The idea is not to make these little promises, these petty, empty, like politicians making campaign promises. I promise I'll do this, I promise I'll do that, and then all they do is take care of themselves and get into affairs. So our goal is the opposite. Our goal is to make a sudden, serious, hardcore change, take a routine or a bad habit and break it, or create a good routine or a good habit, make changes, make them stick, and progress sometimes is made by jumps and not just by crawling or gradual shifting of the gears. That's the Ramchal in Derech Hashem, and he has quite a bit of Kabbalistic sources behind him to support the concept. Take a quick break, make Hamutzi if you'd like, and we'll continue with God's help, some halachic discussion in a few minutes.